Hello, 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 and namaste, witchlings. How are we doing tonight? I see you, Andrea. The only thing I hate about my lipstick is that if I eat, I end up looking like, yeah. Anyway, all right, witchlings. Come on in, gather in, pull up a chair around the metaphorical cauldron, because tonight we are doing what this show does best. We are bitching. We are not whining. We are not doom scrolling. This is not performative outrage. We are currently clear-eyed, evidence-based, sailor-mouthed bitching. Because some things deserve calm reflection, and other things deserve a good old-fashioned what in the absolute fuck are we doing? Tonight, we will be talking about Iran, military escalation, and the absolute fucking clown show surrounding the dignified transfer of remains and the ancient concept that some modern leaders apparently skipped in civics class. You don't send troops first and settle the war later. A good president sells the idea of conflict to the American people first. Because, well, democracy is not supposed to operate like a bar fight where someone shouts, "Hold my beer," and suddenly missiles are flying. And before we go any further, before we even say one more paragraph, I want y'all to know I support the troops. I'm a veteran. Therefore, I know the cost. And supporting the troops means valuing their lives enough to question the people sending them into danger. Blind loyalty is not patriotism. Accountability is. So tonight, we're going to talk about respect, responsibility, and leadership. And yes, there will be swearing. Ugh. All right. Let me take a quick sip and I'll introduce myself. All right, witches and witchlings and peoples out there. I am Di the Yoga Witch. I am a certified yoga instructor. I am a practicing witch of 30 years, but mostly tonight I want to talk about the fact that I am a service-connected disabled veteran of the United States Navy. So I know what I'm talking about here. I come from a long line of military family, and I am pissed. So, let's start with the part people conveniently forget when they talk about war like it's a fucking strategy game. It's not a headline. It's not a cable news debate. War is not a map with arrows moving across it while some talking head explains strategic objectives. War is human beings. It is 17 to 19-year-old kids who were worried about passing algebra or geometry a year ago, suddenly sitting in a desert with a rifle, staring at a horizon that could explode at any moment, wondering if they're going to make it home. It's the sound of helicopters at night. It's the sound of helicopters at night and the way your nervous system never quite forgets that. It's the smell of burning equipment and dust and diesel that somehow sticks in your brain for the rest of your days. It's the moment you realize the person next to you who ate breakfast with you this morning may not be there tomorrow. War is families watching the phone every single day, hoping it doesn't ring, hoping that knock on the door never comes. Because everyone in a military family knows what that knock means. War is marriages stretched thin across oceans and time zones. It's kids learning to recognize their parents' voice through a glitchy video call. It's missed birthdays, first steps missed, holidays celebrated whenever they get back. And sometimes it's entire lifetimes missed. War is also what happened after the deployment. It's the PTSD that shows up quietly years later. It's prosthetic limbs and long-ass physical therapy sessions. It's traumatic brain injuries, TBI, that make everyday tasks so much harder than they should be. It is decades and decades of medical care and a VA system that sometimes, frequently struggles to keep up with the human consequences of political decisions. It's veterans sitting in parking lots after job interviews trying to figure out how to translate a life of military service into a civilian resume. It's trying to re-enter a civilian world that kept spinning while your whole life was frozen in a combat zone. And here's something that civilians don't usually fully understand. When troops deploy, the mission matters, yes. Morale matters, yes. Purpose matters. Soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and Guardians are astonishingly resilient when they know why they're there. Human beings can endure incredible hardship when the mission is clear and the leadership is competent. But when the mission gets muddy, when the objectives keep shifting, when justification changes every few minutes, depending on the political winds, when leadership feels sloppy or reactive instead of deliberate, that's when morale cracks. And morale cracking in a combat environment isn't theoretical, it's fucking dangerous. History shows us this again and again and again. Look at Vietnam. Look at Iraq. Look at Afghanistan. When the political leadership fails to articulate a clear, credible purpose for war, the people paying the price are not the pundits on television. They're the kids in the sandbox carrying the rifles. Now, let's talk about something that that chaps my ass and absolutely lit a fire under my veteran brain this week. We had what is typically called the dignified transfer of remains. Hence, you might want to notice that I said typically called the dignified transfer of remains. For those of you who don't know what it is, let me explain what that moment actually represents. When a service member dies overseas, their body is brought home to the United States. The aircraft lands quietly, the ramp lowers slowly, and the flag-draped transfer case is carried with deliberate precision by an honor guard who have rehearsed every single step down to the inch. Nothing about this is casual. Every movement is intentional and every second carries weight. This ceremony is one of the most solemn rituals the military performs because it is the moment when the country formally receives back one of its own. This is it is a point where sacrifice becomes real. Not a statistic, not a news chyron, a fucking person. There are honor guards standing rigid and silent. There are chaplains, fellow service members who knew the fallen. And most painfully of all, their families. I am so furious over this right now. Their parents, their spouses, siblings and kids who are far, far too young to understand why everybody is crying. There's almost always silence in the air at these ceremonies, not because it was ordered, but because grief and respect tend to be a quiet crowd, pretty naturally, right? Even the wind seems to move differently during these moments. It is supposed to be treated with absolute respect, right? Now, imagine you're standing there as a grieving parent. Your child has died in service to their country. Or you're a grieving spouse who's just lost your life partner. Everything in your world has been turned upside down, inside out, and backwards because the future you imagined is gone. The milestones that were supposed to happen, careers, weddings, children, grandchildren, have vanished into a folded flag. You are standing on that flight line, trying to process something that no person should ever have to process. And the commander-in-chief, the person who ultimately carries the responsibility for sending our troops into harm's way, shows up wearing a fucking baseball cap like he's headed to a goddamned barbecue. Just in his mind, gotta sell his merch. That's all he fucking cares about. A $35 hat or so. Still sitting on his fucking head at a moment that demands solemnity. Now, pay attention here. This is not about fashion. This is not about whether someone prefers suits or jackets and ties. This is about respect. Respect for ritual, respect for the fallen. Every culture on earth understands the ceremonial respect for the dead. Humans have been honoring our fallen for thousands of years. From ancient burial rites to modern military funerals, societies create rituals precisely because grief needs structure. Military culture especially takes those rituals very seriously. You remove your hat, you stand up straight, you shut your fucking mouth, and you honor the fallen. You make that moment about them, not about you and your fucking merch. That's not politics, that is basic human dignity and decency. And when the leader of the nation, the person entrusted with the lives of the armed forces, can't even manage that small, simple act of respect, it tells you something. It tells you a lot. It tells you that that moment was no longer about the fallen. It wasn't about the family standing there. It wasn't about the weight of their sacrifice. It was all about him. I'm going to take a breath, take a drink, and settle down a little bit because I'm ragey. I have known for a long time that the man had zero respect for our military, especially for our wounded and our lost. Yeah. All right. Let's talk about how we go to war. Because here's something that really, really matters. War in a democracy absolutely requires legitimacy. And legitimacy requires consent. That consent comes from the people. Who'd have thunk it, right? In a monarchy, a king can wake up in a bad mood and decide it's time to march an army across a border. Right? Right. In a dictatorship, the leader doesn't need permission from anyone. Orders go out, tanks roll, and the population is expected to salute and shut the fluff up. But that is not how a democracy is supposed to function. In a democracy, the government derives its authority from the people. That's the entire premise of the system. Which means, when the government decides to risk the lives of its citizens in war, it kind of carries a responsibility to explain why. Not in vague slogans, not in half sentences and campaign talking points, in clear, credible, honest language. Because war is the most serious power a government possesses. It involves the lives of real people. Real fucking people. The commitment of enormous national resources and consequences that can ripple for decades. Hell, how many of us are still paying for Vietnam? Historically, strong presidents have understood this. Franklin Roosevelt didn't just wake up one morning and send troops charging into World War II. Long before the United States formally entered the war, Roosevelt spent years preparing the American public to understand the threat posed by fascism in Europe and imperial expansion in Asia. Through speeches, policies, and alliances, he gradually built an understanding among Americans that the world was moving towards a dangerous moment. By the time Pearl Harbor forced the nation into war, the public understood what kind of fight they were entering. John F. Kennedy did something similar during the Cuban Missile Crisis. When the Soviet Union placed nuclear missiles in Cuba in '62, Kennedy didn't immediately start launching strikes. No, instead he went on national television and spoke directly to the American people. He explained the situation, he explained the risks, and he explained the options his administration was considering. He treated the American public like adults capable of understanding a serious problem. And in doing so, he brought the country into the movement with him rather than leaving people to guess what the fuck was happening behind closed doors. Elder Bush, George H.W. Bush, followed that same pattern before the Gulf War. After Iraq invaded Kuwait in '90, Bush didn't simply send troops and hope the country would catch up later. He built an international coalition. He worked through Congress. He addressed the nation. He made the case that the invasion threatened global stability and international law. Whether you agreed with those conflicts or not, the pattern was clear. They made the case, they laid out the threat, they explained the objectives, they articulated the costs, then they acted. Because when the nation understands the mission, the nation can support it. Soldiers know why they're fighting, families understand the sacrifice being asked of them. The country moves forward with a shared sense of purpose. But when leaders skip that step, when the missiles launch before the explanation arrives, when the public learns about escalation through breaking news alerts instead of a deliberate national conversation, you guys, that's not leadership, that's improvisation. I'm sorry, I don't want my improv to be from my government. I want it to be from the comedian standing on stage. Because improvisation with military force is one of the most dangerous games a country can play. Because war is not a policy experiment. It is not a tool you test out to see what happens. It's a fucking commitment measured in lives. Which brings us to the gigantic elephant in the fucking room right now, Iran. Iran is not some minor regional nuisance that can be poked without consequence. It is a complex, powerful country with a long history, a sophisticated political system, and a military structure that has spent decades studying how to counter larger conventional forces. Ours specifically, by the way. Iran is a major geopolitical player. They have allies, they have proxies, and they have significant military capability. Their influence stretches across Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and Yemen through a network of groups and militias that allow them to project power indirectly. That strategy, what analysts call asymmetric warfare, lets them apply pressure without always engaging in direct confrontation with a stronger military. Interesting. They also, shockingly, possess ballistic missile capabilities. They have naval forces designed specifically to harass shipping traffic in the Persian Gulf, and geographically they sit next to one of the most strategically important waterways on the planet, the Strait of Hormuz, where a massive portion of the world's oil supply passes through every single fucking day. So, when people talk casually about escalating with Iran, what they are really talking about is potentially destabilizing an entire region that sits at the center of global energy markets and international security. That is not a small move. That is not a quick strike and go home. No, it is not. And here's something that makes it even more complicated. Iran understands long games. Their strategic thinking is shaped by thousands of years of history. They operate on timelines that stretch across decades. They absorb pressure, adapt to it, and look for opportunities to respond in ways that maximize leverage. Which means that if the United States escalates recklessly in that region, the consequences don't stay contained to one single battlefield. They ripple outwards into shipping lanes, oil markets, regional stability, global alliances, financial markets, and diplomatic relationships. And of course, the biggest risk of all, escalation spirals. History shows that wars rarely begin with a clear intention to ignite massive conflicts. Leaders almost never wake up and decide they want a catastrophe. Instead, wars tend to grow out of smaller confrontations. A strike here, a retaliation there, a miscalculation, an assumption that the other side won't respond. We all know what assuming does, don't we? Overconfidence in the belief that the situation can be controlled. And suddenly, the machinery of conflict begins moving faster than anyone expected. World War I is a classic example. It began with the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand in 1914, an event that could have remained a regional crisis. But alliances activated, mobilizations escalated, and within weeks, a chain reaction pulled much of the planet into war. That's the thing about escalation! Exclamation, wow. That, my friends, is the thing about escalation. Once that machinery starts moving, it becomes incredibly difficult to stop it. Which is exactly why democratic leaders have a responsibility to slow down before they start it. Selling the idea of war, making the case to the public, is not manipulation. It is accountability. If military action is truly necessary, leaders should be able to explain 5 simple things. Number 1, what the threat is. 2, why military force is required. 3, what the objectives are. 4, what victory looks like. And 5, what it will cost. Lives, money, time, long-term care for wounded veterans, ripple effects across global politics. War is so expensive in ways that go far, far beyond the defensive budget, and the public deserves honesty about that. If leaders cannot articulate those things clearly, if they dodge the questions, shift the narrative every few minutes, days, weeks, or rely on slogans instead of explanations, then maybe this war should not happen. Because if you cannot explain the mission to the public, the people whose sons and daughters will be doing the fighting, then how the fuck are you going to explain it to the troops risking their lives? Clarity isn't optional, friends. That is leadership. Time to take a sip. Oh, sorry. Right. We'll touch on that later. I forgot about that. All right. If y'all are enjoying this podcast and feel called to step just a smidge bit deeper into our coven, go ahead and tap that join button and become a channel member. There are some amazing perks waiting for all the Witchlings, with membership levels starting at just $1 a month. How affordable is that shit? Now, if membership isn't in the cards for you right now, you can still help and support our channel for free by subscribing and sharing this video with a friend. Please share away. I appreciate all the support from you guys. You are amazing, and thank you so very much for tuning in. All right, let's get back to the show. All right, you guys, now let's talk about the veteran perspective here, because it's a unique one. Now, as a veteran, here's what I want from my leadership. I want clarity. I want honesty. I want respect. Don't expect perfection. I don't want perfection. No one expects perfection. War is chaotic by definition. Plans fall apart, intelligence shifts, the situation on the ground changes in ways nobody could predict. Anyone who has ever served understands all of that, but the foundation still matters. Clarity means knowing why you're there. It means the mission has been thought through before people are sent into harm's way. It means the objectives are clear enough that the troops carrying them out can explain them in a sentence or two if someone asks. Because here's something civilians don't necessarily realize. Service members talk. We talk in the barracks. We talk in the motor pool. We talk on ships and in tents and on night watch rotations. We talk about the mission. And when the mission makes sense, you can feel it. Okay, Dr. Pepper is not going to talk back. When the mission makes sense, you can feel it. There's a sense of direction, a sense that the hardship means something, that the long hours and the danger and the exhaustion are moving towards a legitimate, real goal. But when the mission is muddy, when leadership sounds like, when explanations from leadership sound like it was written by a committee of people trying to avoid responsibility, dude, you better believe that shit spreads too. Doubt travels fast in an organization. Honesty is the second thing we want. Don't lie to the public. Don't sugarcoat the risk. Do not pretend a war is going to be quick and clean if you know damn good and well it's not going to be. Veterans remember the speeches. We remember the promises. We remember the confident declarations that something would be finished in months that somehow turned into years or decades. How many of us remember mission accomplished? When leaders are honest about the stakes, even when the news is difficult, people can handle it. Adults understand that sometimes a country faces real threats that require real sacrifice. But when leaders manipulate the story, when they shift the justification every few hours or days, when they start sounding more like campaign strategists than commanders, ooh, that corrodes trust. And trust is everything in the military chain of command. Third thing I want, respect. Respect for the troops, respect for the families, and respect for the fact that when a government deploys military force, it is asking real human beings to step into situations where death is a very real possibility. Do not treat war like a fucking campaign stunt. Don't use it as a prop for political theater. And for the love of all things holy, do not stand in front of a flag and act tough while quietly treating the people behind that flag like they're cannon fodder. Because we know better. We veterans especially know better. We've seen the hospitals. We've walked those long-ass corridors in the military medical centers where young people are learning how to use prosthetic limbs. We've seen TBI we've seen the TBI that doesn't show up on the outside but quietly reshapes someone's entire fucking life. We've seen the counseling rooms where people try to explain memories that refuse to stay in the past. We've seen the funerals, the folded flags, the families who received them. War doesn't stop when the shooting stops. And that is something that the public typically doesn't see. They don't get that the battlefield might quiet down. The headlines are going to move on. Politicians are going to start talking about the next issue. But for a lot of us veterans, the war keeps going. It is the gift that keeps on giving, I tell you what. It lives in the nervous system, in the way certain sounds snap your attention across a room, in the dreams that wake you up at 2:30 in the morning, in the hyper-awareness that never quite turns off. Ask members of my family how often they've gotten an elbow to the solar plexus because they happened to step up behind me. In the invisible recalibration your brain did in order to survive environments where mistakes could get people killed. For a lot of vets, that adjustment lasts decades and sometimes an entire lifetime. Now, mind you, none of that means service wasn't worth it. Many veterans like me carry deep pride in what they did and the people they served beside. But pride and cost can exist at the same time. Both things can be true. Which is why when political leaders start acting reckless with military power, veterans tend to notice a lot faster than most people. Because we know what those decisions actually lead to. We know what the bill looks like when it arrives. And it is never, ever, ever just a number in a budget spreadsheet. It is human. It is personal. And it lasts a lot longer than any election cycle. So, when we veterans get loud about war, when we start speaking up about caution, about accountability, about making damn sure the mission is real and necessary before troops deploy, it ain't because we hate our country. It's because we love the people who serve it, and we know exactly who pays the bill when leadership gets it wrong. And we don't like it. Now, I'm going to take a sip, and then we're going to talk about real patriotism and the calm fire here. I want to say something that very much needs to be said far more often. And I'm going to say this real slow so everyone in the back gets it. Questioning war is not unpatriotic. Demanding accountability from leaders is not unpatriotic. In fact, it's the polar opposite. Somewhere along the way, especially in the modern media circus, a strange and very dangerous idea started creeping into public conversation. And that idea is that patriotism means agreeing with whatever the government decides to do. That loyalty means silence. That if you raise questions about military action, if you ask for clarity, if you want to know what the mission is and what the end game looks like, somehow that makes you disloyal. That idea is not patriotism. That is propaganda. Because blind obedience is how bad decisions multiply. History is full of examples of government marching confidently into disasters because nobody wanted to be the person who raised their hand and said, wait, hold on a second. Are we sure about this? Real patriotism is not about cheering louder than everybody else. Real patriotism is about caring enough about real patriotism is about caring enough about your country to insist that it lives up to its own ideals. The United States was literally founded on questioning authority. Seriously, people. The United States was literally founded on questioning authority. The revolutionary tradition of this country came from people who challenged power, demanded accountability, and fucking refused to accept leadership that treated them like subjects instead of citizens. That spirit didn't disappear once the Constitution was written. It became part of the system. The founders designed checks and balances because they understood something fundamental about human nature. Power needs limits. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. Authority needs oversight. Leaders need to know that someone is paying attention. And when it comes to war, those limits matter even more. Because sending Americans into combat is the single most serious decision our government can make. It makes human beings, real people with families and futures. It means they are going to be placed into situations where they could be injured or worse, killed. It means taxpayers commit enormous resources that could otherwise be used for schools, infrastructure, healthcare, and countless other priorities. It means foreign populations will also suffer the consequences of bombs, firefights, and instability. War is not an abstract policy debate. It is a life and death commitment, which is exactly why it should never, ever be casual. Real patriotism means asking hard questions before that decision is made. What exactly is the threat? Why is military force necessary? What are our objectives? What does success actually look like? And how long are we prepared to stay involved if things become complicated? These questions are not signs of weakness. They are signs of responsibility. In fact, the people asking those questions are often the ones who take the military the most seriously. Veterans, historians, diplomats, military strategists. Many of the voices urging caution are people who have spent their lives studying or experiencing what war actually does to countries and communities. They know it's not a video game. They know it's not a movie. They know there's no cinematic soundtrack when things fall to shit. They know wars have consequences that echo long after the headlines fade. Real patriotism also means caring enough about our troops to demand that their sacrifices actually mean something. If someone is going to risk their life in uniform, the mission objective had better fucking matter. The objective had better be fucking real. The leadership had better have thought it through. Service members deserve so much more than vague slogans and shifting explanations. They deserve leaders who take their responsibilities seriously enough to plan carefully before Let me say that again. To plan carefully before asking them to fight. Because the people who raise their right hand and volunteer to serve are offering something incredibly fucking rare. They are offering their safety, time, their bodies, and sometimes their lives. And the least a nation can do in return is ensure that when those sacrifices are made, they are made for a purpose that is clear, necessary, and most of all, worthy of the cost. So when citizens speak up about war, when they question escalation, demand explanations, or push for diplomatic alternatives, they are not undermining their country. They are participating in the democratic process the country was designed to protect. That process is messy. It involves debate, disagreement, and uncomfortable conversations about strategy, risk, and morality. But that's the point. Democracy is not supposed to be quiet. It is supposed to be thoughtful. It is supposed to be deliberate. And it is supposed to ensure that when the United States commits to war, it does so with the full awareness of the people whose lives will be shaped by that action. That is not weakness. That is real patriotism. Now, with all of that said, let's ground this for just a second. Because this rant is not about panic. Panic helps no one. Panic shuts down critical thinking. It makes people reactive instead of thoughtful. Panic spreads faster than facts and leaves confusion in its wake. Information helps everyone. Information allows people to make decisions instead of just reacting emotionally to the loudest headline of the day. So the goal here is not panic. The goal here is awareness. Stay informed. That doesn't mean doom scrolling yourself into a stress spiral at 2 a.m. It means paying attention to credible information and understanding enough about foreign policy to recognize when something serious is happening. Support military families. Behind every deployment is a web of spouses, parents, siblings, children, and friends carrying their own kind of stress. They're managing households alone. They're raising kids while worrying about someone thousands of miles away. They are living with uncertainty for months at a time. Imagine being a military spouse FaceTiming with your partner who is in the sandbox when you hear that siren go off. All of a sudden, the screen goes black after you have seen people moving faster than you've ever seen people moving before. Can you imagine that terror? Because I can. So can my best friend. And we need to remember that community support matters more than people realize. Support veterans, too. Not just with slogans or bumper stickers. We don't need that shit. Support us with real resources, mental health services, healthcare access, and programs that help vets transition back into civilian life with dignity and opportunity. Because service doesn't end when we take off the uniform. The effects often last a lifetime. Pay attention to foreign policy. It may sound like something reserved for diplomats and think tanks, but it affects everything, from global stability to economic markets to whether young Americans are sent overseas. And demand clarity from elected officials. Ask questions. Listen carefully to how leaders explain their decisions. Notice when explanations are detailed and grounded, and when they rely on vague slogans and emotional appeals. Leadership should withstand scrutiny. If a policy is strong, it should survive honest questions. And remember something essential about democracy, my friends. It requires participation. Not once every 4 years, constantly. Voting matters, of course, but so does everything between elections. Public conversation, civic engagement, community awareness, and informed debate. I can talk. Democracy does not run on autopilot. It only works when citizens care enough to stay involved. Because leadership, at the end of the day, is no spectator sport. All right. Let's start wrapping this up. Here's where I land tonight, you guys. I don't want war. I don't want escalation. And I sure as fuck do not want yet another generation of veterans spending decades trying to untangle the trauma of decisions that were made far, far away from the battlefield. Saying that does not make someone weak. It means they understand the cost. People who have seen the consequences of war up close tend to talk about it very differently than people who treat it like a geopolitical chess match. When you've seen the hospital wards, when you've attended the funerals, when you've watched families rebuild their lives after loss, you learn something pretty quickly. War is never abstract. It is always personal. Which is why real strength in leadership is not about sounding tough. It's about restraint. It's about understanding that military force is sometimes necessary, but it is never, ever casual. It is the last tool you reach for, not the first one you grab when the political pressure starts rising. True respect for the military is not applause at sporting events. It's not slogans. It's not dramatic speeches wrapped in flags. True respect for the military is careful, thoughtful decision-making before lives are put on the line. It's leaders asking hard questions before they ever once give an order. It's leaders recognizing that every deployment carries consequences that will ripple through families, communities, and generations. Power without discipline is not strength. It's ego. And ego has started a lot of wars throughout human history. Empires have risen and fallen because someone in power decided that their pride mattered more than patience, more than diplomacy, more than human fucking life. So tonight, we stay informed, we stay grounded, and we keep our eyes open and our minds engaged. And we remember something simple, but very important. Those people in uniform are not chess pieces. They are not statistics. They are human beings. They are sons, daughters, spouses, parents, friends, and neighbors. And their lives deserve leaders who treat war with the seriousness it demands. I'm going to check in with chat real quick, if I can click right. Without Israel, we wouldn't have, without the Judaism of Israel, we wouldn't have Christianity. That is true too, Nicole. No faith is absolute. I am very, very passionate about this particular exercise because not only am I a service-connected disabled vet, my bestie's husband is over there. Her brother and ex-husband are both saying they're going to re-enlist because they're both veterans, and they're going to go over there. I hate this because I am seeing 3 little girls who could potentially lose their daddy or daddies. And I hate it. It's bad enough if and when he comes home, he's not going to be the same. I grew up with a dad with PTSD. I have PTSD. I would not wish that on another generation. And this is horrific. And on that note, John, as much as I love seeing you, I really wish you would sleep. I hate your insomnia. I worry about you, friend. And with that, you guys, I love you all. Let's go out there and spread love, spread joy, spread kindness. Tell the people you love that you love them. Do not assume they know. Say it. Say it loudly. Say it often. Say it to the humans in your life and the furry and feathered ones too, the ones with scales or feathers or whatever. Make sure the ones you love know. Because life is fragile and none of us are guaranteed tomorrow. And witchlings, always remember this. You are loved. You are wanted. You are needed. And you have a reason and a purpose for being here, even if you don't fully see it yet. It took me till I was 45. You matter. Your presence matters. And the world is so much better because you are all in it. I love you guys to bits. I will see you the next time we're streaming. Blessed be. Namaste, witchlings. Good night.